to like a mic. What does it take to honestly be a world changer for Jesus? I don't think it's much. I think that we overthink things too much as Christians. And we overthink things because we want to put the emphasis on who we are and what we have to do, on what we have to say, and the amount of effort that we have to put in. I honestly do think in order to change the world, life can be as simply as just a table. I don't think God is asking for more than that from us. Just simply a table. That's all. So I want to talk about a table for Jesus. A table for Jesus. Father, thank you. Thank you that you are with us in this place. Thank you that your Spirit is speaking here even now. Bless us, Father, as we continue in this place, as we continue in this time. In Jesus' name, amen. As a kid growing up in Fulham, West London, my mum would prepare tea, as we called it then, and still call it now. We would have tea at 6 o'clock every evening in my house. Every evening. My mum would cook for me, my brothers, and our friends. And we would descend upon the kitchen, which was in the basement of our house. We would descend upon the kitchen at 6 o'clock sharp, and food would be finished promptly at 6:05. 6:07. But we wouldn't leave the kitchen. We wouldn't leave the kitchen until about 8, 9 o'clock. We would finish the food quick, but we stayed at that table. And at that table, we dreamed and we schemed and we came up with all kind of terrible schemes, legal and illegal. Just terrible schemes. But we saw the value. My mum never allowed us. The only day we could eat in front of the TV was once a week on a Sunday evening. Apart from that, no, you eat at a table. The table. So that you will eat at the table. And to this day, we don't watch TV and eat. We sit at a table with the TV over there and watch it and eat. At least we're doing it at a table, don't laugh. But we would sit there, and I saw the value. And coming into ministry, ever since the time I came into ministry, I have seen the value, Ray, of the table. Is that for me, darling? Is that for me? You couldn't put it on the table. Lord have mercy, man. They'll just come like, yeah, but you want to pick this one up? Yeah? Oh, look at that. She brought it in a mug as well. She knows I am a man. No, I will not give it to him in a glass. He will drink his water from a mug. Thank you, darling. I've seen the blessing of the table. I've seen the blessing of a dinner table. I have seen the ministry of a dinner table. I want to tell you about a few people. I want to tell you about a few people because at a table I have seen people who have come from almost obscurity. I've seen people come from nothingness, and through the ministry of a table, their lives have changed. Through the ministry of just sitting around the table, their lives have been transformed. There's a lady called Annette Williams. You may have met her son. Her son's name is Jermaine Wong. He's traveled with me. He's a spoken word poet. Annette Williams became a Christian. When she became a Christian, the whole house changed. Annette had a house of fostered kids. She was a foster parent, single parent, fostering kids. And Annette Williams' house was full of young people. I've been at Annette's house at 2 in the morning in Madrid because it's in South London. South London is one of the hard areas of London. For those of you who have lived there and those of you who have worked there, you know what I'm talking about. Those of you who have traveled extensively through there. You know what I'm talking about? It's one of the hard areas of London. I've been at Annette's house at 2 in the morning and sitting in her kitchen, sitting at the table in her kitchen and hear the door knock. Some just crackhead, literally a crackhead. I'm not just calling him a crackhead to be rude. Crackhead just knock her door and know that at 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, if the light is on in the house, they can come and they can get soup and they can get a cup of tea and they can get just something to eat at her table. At her table. I've seen young people just give their lives. I remember when Shay first told me, my ball player Shay, when he first told me about how he felt about Jesus Christ, was in her kitchen, standing right. Everyone, we had run a youth group called Food for the Brain, and kids used to come every Tuesday night from all over this state housing estate. It's state housing, but we just call them housing estates. Just come from all over this housing estate and descend on our house every Tuesday for 7 years. 7 years, I've just baptized the amount of young people that have come through her house, her front room, her kitchen, her table. And Shay and I was trying to find somewhere after the Bible study, and we just stood by the mirror. I remember it as clear as day, just by the mirror. And we just stood there, and he said, "Pastor, I need to talk to you." And we both kind of just turned our back to everyone. And we stood there, and he said, "Pastor, you know what, I've been around for a lot of years, just traveling and just listening to different people and listening to different things. And this is the first time ever listening to Jesus Christ. And I'm telling you, you're moving me, Pastor. And I don't want to give my life to this man, Jesus Christ. I want to give my life to this man, Jesus Christ, in her kitchen, by her table." Can it be that all it takes is just a table? Then there's Elder Lena Madenda. When we planted Kennington Community Fellowship, she was the head, she was the lead elder, she was the leader. I call her to this day my illustrious leader. When she calls me and I hear her voice, I said, "Oh, my leader." And she calls me her boss. She says, "Oh, my boss." Gentle woman, just calm spirit, ruled us with a rod of iron. Because she had me as her pastor, she had Bobby Bavell as one of her elders, she had Anthony Cameron as one of her elders, she had Mike Black as one of her elders, and these names don't mean nothing to you, I know, but they were just young, powerful, explosive. When we would have leadership meetings, and I would just be in there, just and just doing all my stuff and just being as dynamic as I could. And I would come up with these ideas, and I would look over to her for support, Nick, and she would look at me like this. And I said, "Yes, and we have to make sure that we implement this, and at a later date." And the smile just said, "No, Pastor, that ain't gonna work. Just let it go. Let that one go." She doesn't have a massive dinner table. She has a 2-bedroom apartment. 3-bedroom apartment. She has a very small table. But at her table, young leaders come to her. Young adults, 20-somethings, brilliant. And they sit at her table. On her housing estate, also where she lives, along the balcony, she has alcoholics who live next door. Extreme alcoholics. They knock on her door, and they come in, and she helps them, and all at her table. Can it be, my men and my women, that all the kingdom needs is just people who just have tables? There's Wale. Wale grew up in Annette's house. Wale was one of the kids who was fostered. When Annette became a Christian, Wale started coming to church. When he started coming to food, and he started to come to church. Wale doesn't have a table. All Wale has is just a big settee. But in Wale's house, unless somebody want to fix this while I just... Oh, no, there you go. It was just leaning down, it was just going to sleep. In Walle's house, he runs men's groups and he pulls young men together, all his peers. He pulls them all together once a week. And they come together in his house. They come together in his flat. And they discuss life, and they discuss girls, and they discuss being a man, and they discuss being professional, and they discuss growing up in church, and they discuss what it's like not to grow up in church, but to come from a non-church background and have to deal with all these Adventists. How many of you ever have that conversation in here? Raise your hand. You never grew up in church. Just like, oh gosh. How many of you are like third generation Adventists? How many of you are like 8th generation Adventists? How many of you were Adventists before the Adventist church began? Oh, no, you're just scratching that. Walle's apartment where he has young people and they empower. You know, young people, we overthink it. We overthink it. Because Jesus isn't asking us to do much. He's asking us to use the little that we have, as little as a table for Jesus. There's some lessons that I've learned, 3 simple lessons that I've learned from this, and it's this. Number one, lives empower lives. It's lives that empower lives. The teaching that will affect somebody's life permanently is that their life is important and that their story matters. That's all people really want to know. Does my story matter? As young as I am and as old as I am into these late years, does my story, does my life amount to a story that matters? The cross says it does. The cross of Calvary says yes, it does. Lives empower lives. Number 2, consistent love is impossible to ignore. Consistent love. Not love that is determined by how long an evangelistic meeting is. Not determined by how much money and how long our funding can go for. Not love that is determined as to whether or not I'll like you today or not like you tomorrow. Consistent love. Consistent love is impossible to ignore because consistency is a byproduct of knowing that someone is valuable. Turn to the person next to you and say, you're valuable. And number 3, and you must remember this. Number 3, you must remember this. Jesus protects the ministries he births in you. Jesus protects the ministries he births in you. If Jesus gives you an idea for the kingdom, then he is going to protect that idea for the kingdom. Believe me, I've seen it as a pastor. You can ask Pastor Nick, you can ask Pastor Victor, you can ask Pastor Ray. When the Lord, you can ask anyone in here who's ever had a dream for the kingdom, who's ever had a passion for the kingdom, and people have fought against that passion. Believe me, I can show you a grave of people that have fought against ideas that I have, that God gave me. Now, I can show you the ideas that I had that I thought was really spectacular that God didn't give me, but I really wanted to do. I can take you to the graveyard where they are buried too. Believe me. Take you to the graveyard and the crematorium. But believe me, God, the idea he births in you. Could it be that all it is just a table for Jesus? Let me show you how this works. Normally what we would do in preaching is we would show you a Bible text and then make an illustration. I wanted to show you the illustration first. So now go with me to Mark chapter 2. Go with me to Mark chapter 2. Let me show you how this modern story works in an ancient tale. Let me show you how this modern story works in an ancient tale. Mark chapter 2. And we're going to read from verse 13. Let me just read the story for you. Jesus went out again beside the sea. The whole crowd gathered around him, and he taught them. And as he was walking along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax booth. And he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and he followed Jesus. And as he sat at dinner in Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were also sitting with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. When the scribes of the Pharisees saw that he was eating with sinners and tax collectors, they said to his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and with sinners?" When Jesus heard this, he said to them, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick I have come to call, but only those who are sick. I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners." Mark chapter 2 tells the story of Matthew. Matthew, a Jew, a hated Jew. Why? Because he collected the hated tax of the Romans. The Jews hated the fact, number one, that they had to pay tax to these heathens, these barbarians. Number two, they hated the fact that Jews collected the tax from them. Number three, they hated the fact that Jews collected the tax from them because Jews would make up how much they were taxed. If Rome said you tax them 4 denarii, the Jewish tax collectors would say, well, Rome says you owe them 8 denarii. And everybody knew that they pocketed money. And that's why they hated them. Hated them with a passion. Matthew was a tax collector. Matthew was a tax collector, collecting the despised tax. He spends his whole time and life working out how he will steal from his fellow people. And then one day Jesus is walking along. Jesus sees him where he sits. Jesus sees him where he sits. And that's why I said last night, when you pray, God doesn't listen to what comes out of your mouth. He listens to what comes out of your heart. Because as Matthew sits there in this life of stealing, in this life of what he is doing, God sees his heart. And he sees that what he is doing here is not necessarily a dis- as a person. Jesus says to him, "Follow me." And the story says he gets up immediately where he is. You know why he's able to get up immediately from where he is? Because God has been doing prior work in his life. He's been coming home and he's been hearing stories about Jesus. He's been standing up listening to people talk about Jesus while he's collecting tax. He's been hearing about this Jewish rabbi. He's seeing him in the area. He's walking to his tax table and he's seeing a crowd over there. He said, "Who's over there?" Jesus. He's teaching. Jesus, he just healed blind Bartimaeus. You know blind Bartimaeus? Yeah, blind Bartimaeus comes by here with his handler and begs for money. He can see now. No. Really? Really? He's seeing this, he's hearing this. And so this rabbi passes by him. Now, it's significant for a number of reasons, but the greatest reason is this. Rabbis didn't choose who followed them. People came up to rabbis and said, "I want to follow you," because everyone knew it was impossible to follow a rabbi. You had to prove yourself, so no one did it. You had to know the Mishnah, the Gemara, the Torah. You had to know so much, it was just ridiculous. And when you would ask to follow the rabbi would quote to me from the Torah, quote to me from the Mishnah, ask you questions, and you could have been a brain box. The rabbi would have like, nah, you're not ready. Go and learn some more. Jesus passes by the table of this Haitian man, looks at him, says, okay, it's time now, follow me. And he gets up from his table. And the story says he holds a party and invites Jesus to another table. Now, the table that he invites Jesus to is a beautiful table. Why? Let's go back to the story. This is good. This is good. Why is it a beautiful table? Verse 15. As he sat at dinner at his table in Levi's house, many who? Who? Tax collectors and sinners were doing what? With He gets up from the table where he would collect his taxes and steal. Follower of Jesus. He holds a party, and at his party, he invites all of his tax collecting friends, sinners, publicans, Republicans, Democrats, I don't know. Labor, Conservative, National, International, Alternational, everyone. And he brings them to his table. He throws a dinner party, invites all the outcasts like himself to dine with Jesus, and there is no difference put between who the disciples of Jesus are. I love the statement. It says that there were many sinners, tax collectors, who were sitting with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many who followed Jesus sitting at that table. You know, it's so easy for us to really define who sits at the table. Well, no, you don't keep the Sabbath, so you don't sit at the table. No, you're not a vegetarian, so you don't sit at the table. You're gay, you definitely don't sit at the table. You're divorced, you can sit at a side table. Oh, we are really good at defining who sits at the table. But Jesus defines who sits at the table, not by your behavior, but by your heart. For there were many who followed Jesus. You see, this gives hope to everyone in here. It gives hope to me. I don't know about you. Thank you, Jesus. Because I know if it was down to you, I wouldn't sit there. If it was down to me, believe me, half of you wouldn't sit there. But if it's down to Jesus, everybody say, that's right, because we all get a choice. We all get the opportunity to sit at the table. Let me teach you some things about the table for you alone. There are 4 important things that we need to learn about a table for Jesus. Number 1, a table for Jesus isn't filled with the obvious. I learned that in ministry. When I would see who would sit around Leonard's table, Annette's table, and Walle's table, when I have come to have people sit around my table, I do know that a table for Jesus isn't filled with the obvious. And if you are going to be a world changer, your table must never be filled with the obvious. Never be filled. You must count it all joy when people come to your house and see people around your table and ask you, ooh. Hey man, it's a table for Jesus. It's cool. It's cool. It's a Jesus table. You're sitting at it. It's a Jesus table, man. It's not filled with the obvious. Number 2, a table for Jesus is an open table. It's an open table. Do you know the most intentional thing we will do in this life is love someone? And the most difficult thing that Jesus is asking us to do as Seventh-day Adventists before the second coming of Christ is love. I know you thought it was keep the Sabbath. Sorry. I know you thought it was know all the prophecies. Because we do all that without thinking. Come on now. We're Adventists without thinking, aren't we? Come on now. Come on now. Come on now. Come on now. You'll be driving home on a Friday, just driving, things to do, still looking at the sun. Sunset. All right, I can still get into the supermarket. Oh, you're like, oh my gosh, it's true. It's true. Come on now, come on now, come on now. You know what I mean? You'll look at stuff on them. If you're a meat eater, you look at stuff on the menu. You know, you look at, I could do with some fish. You know, and then when the waiter comes, you're like, does this fish have fins and scales? You know, the waiter's like, what? I don't know. What kind of fish is this? Like a fish in the sea? Waiter's like, I don't know. You know. We do all of that stuff without thinking. The most difficult and glorious thing that Jesus is asking us to do before the second coming is love. It's love. Love is going to define who we are as Sevis before Jesus comes. Why? Because you ain't in control of where love takes you. Oh yeah, if Jesus says go over here and love this one, what are you going to say? No, Jesus, before they are common and unclean. They are common and unclean. And Jesus, yeah, but my blood is shed for them. Okay. A table for Jesus is an open table. Number 3, a table for Jesus remembers who used to sit there. What did Matthew do? Matthew didn't become a Sevi of all of his old friends and go about his new life like they didn't exist anymore. No, there are some friends that we have that you need to lock off because you can't go into Christianity with them with you because they are committed to where they are and they're going to take too much out of you. But when you are strong, strengthen your brethren. Don't forget them. Don't forget them. What did he do? He went back and got all his old friends and invited them, said, no, you got to come to this. You got to come to this. Now, what we invite them to is really going to be a revelation seminar. You know, we ain't going to invite them. Yes, come and hear prophecies about beasts that are coming out of the beasts and the beasts and the beasts. And the story is told of an old preacher who was doing an evangelistic crusade. He was just deep down in the prophecies, and he had beasts coming out of the sea and beasts coming out of the air and beasts coming out of the earth, and he was getting these beasts mixed up with these beasts, and in the end he just said, people, there was a whole lot of beasts, man. There was a whole lot of beasts. Yeah, what you know, invite them to a table. Invite them into a personal space. Into a personal space. A table for Jesus remembers who sat there. And lastly, a table for Jesus never apologizes, but always defends who sits there. The scribes and Pharisees, how come your master's eating with scribes, with publicans and sinners, etc.? They said, what did Jesus do? Jesus defended the people that sat with him. Now that's difficult for us because we're so good at defining who's in and who's out. We spend our lives defining who's in and who's out. And you know, you have to put your neck on the line to defend some people sometimes who will turn around and just swear at the people. You know, we all have friends like that, you know. Just, and then beep, beep, beep. Forget you lot then. Like, they're with me. And then people look at you, reckless Christian spending all their time with all these reckless people. Hey, a table for Jesus never apologizes for who sits there, but they defend them. Why? Because they have come to where Jesus is. When they come to where Jesus is, they must know that they're valued by you. I'm done now. We are tables for Jesus. We are a community here that is a table for Jesus as individuals and collectively. And we must invite people to where we are. Can it be that for a church that struggles to make the gospel have any real impact in Western society, all it takes is something as simple as us inviting people into our homes and into our personal spaces and allowing them to sit at a table for Jesus? Could it be that that's all it is? I mean, could it be that all Jesus wants you to do is share your life with people, because everything else is a Bible study? Everything else is a Bible study. Could it be that you're a table for Jesus? Touch the person next to you and ask them, are you a table for Jesus? Hey.